Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Talk Education. In this video, I want to begin talking again about PowerShell. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, coming back to PowerShell now, and I'm interested in what's called the pipelining technique of putting two commands together. I want to talk about how the pipeline happens in Linux and then how it happens in PowerShell, and just examine the power of using the pipe command to do some additional commands. So let's get started. It should be informative and useful in your career. Alright, so here we are in Kali Linux. I have a terminal window open, and what we're going to do first is I'm going to create a folder to create the work that we're going to do. So I'm going to make directory, and I'm going to call this PowerShell projects. This really isn't PowerShell, but I'm going to do the same thing when I'm on the Windows computer to show you how the two work. Next thing I'm going to do is cd into PowerShell projects. There's nothing in there yet, it's empty. If I do an ls, it'll show up as empty. Clear the screen. Let's make a file. So what we want to do is we want to just put in 2 or 3 common services that are occurring in the Linux world. We want to have those in a text file. What we want to do is we want to use the text file to pipe into a bash script so that we can find out if that service is running and what its status is. So the idea here is we're going to have a standalone file that has all of the services that we're interested in monitoring keyed into it, and then we'll use a shell script to go and query those services and give us the information on the services. There are Linux commands for this, so I'm just going out of the way here doing this because I want you to see how this works, but then we want to juxtapose this with what we can do in PowerShell. So let's go ahead and touch, and we're going to call this services.txt, like so, and I'll hit enter, and then I'm going to nano this file. So I'll say nano services.txt. Now I'm always compelled to use sudo nano. I could do it here, but in this case it's local to me. It's in my local folder here, so I do have permissions to go ahead and edit this doc. I'm going to put in some services here. So Nginx, which you may not have heard of, is another web server product that's included with a lot of distros, Linux distros, and it's a very good web server product. It's used for load balancing, all kinds of other stuff. So Nginx is something that you probably need to learn extensively and be able to manage extensively. Secure Shell is the way that we can get remote into other computers. And then let's go ahead and put in CUPS, which is the Common Unix Print System. It's for printing in Linux, and a cron, which does scheduled jobs. So we could launch what's called a cron job for, say, backups or something like that. I'll hit Control-O and Enter to save, and Control-X. And I'll do an ls-tech-l to make sure that it has data in it, and sure enough it's got data in it. And that's our file. So we want to take these services that we're most interested in. You could imagine that you were an administrator, for example, a Linux administrator, and you've got the services you're wanting to monitor. You don't want to get all of them, you just want to get a few services that you're really interested in looking at. How are they behaving? And then we want to use a shell script, a bash shell script, to do that work for us, to see what their condition is. So that's where we're trying to head. Clear the screen. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to make a file. We're going to touch a file, and I'm going to call this file checkservices.shell, like so. Now this .sh is important to have because what that's indicating to the system is that it is a shell script, and you'll see .c for a C programming language script, CPP for C++, PY for Python, RB for Ruby, Go. You get the idea. So the idea of the extension here is we're noting that this is an executable. The extension is not required in Linux, but it is very helpful for Linux administrators to be able to see and look through here and say, okay, what is this? What is this doing? Why is this doing this? That sort of an idea. So now we've got this services shell. I'm going to go ahead and nano that, so I'll clear, and I'll nano check services.shell. Now I happen to have some code here that I'm going to paste into this, and I'll go through the code with you. Okay, I've enlarged the screen just a tiny little bit, and I've pasted in the script that we're going to use here. Let's start out first of all with this hashtag here. So there's a variety of ways that you can call this symbol. Hashtag, £, number sign, but this is really interesting to me being a musician. I know that the symbol for a sharp in a key like a C sharp is called a sharp, and that's the symbol for a sharp key. And then this symbol here is called exclamation point. Every coder around calls it bang because exclamation point takes up way too many syllables to be able to say. The combination of these two is called a shebang. SH for sharp, bang for exclamation point, SHEBANG, shebang. And what it does, it has to be at the head of every bash script. What it's doing is it's saying, here's the shell that I'm using. And we have to match that shell up with the shell that we're actually using, else it may not work correctly. Also at the top here, notice that I've got a star here. The star means that I have not yet saved changes. So this first line, this is the shebang, and it's saying, oh, I'm using bin bash for my shell. Now let's take a look down here because this is where the real meat of the script gets going. I'll arrow up just a little bit. I can't arrow, I have to use my keys because this isn't really a GUI editor. We've got a while loop here. Now what a while loop does, and you guys are coders, you know this, it guarantees that you're going to get into the loop at least one time. So we're saying, well, we've got at least one entry in our system here, and so we're going to jump into it one time, and we're reading, and we're doing a TACR, which means read, service, semicolon, and then we're saying do. So we're saying do something. So while I'm reading a service out of my file, my file doesn't show up here yet, we'll see it at the bottom. While I'm reading my list of services out of this file, I want you to do this thing. That's what that code is saying. So if system control list units type of service, so this is all one system control command. You could go in and test that out just in a native Linux terminal and see what it does. But by the way, I learned the other day, I was really intrigued by this. So this idea of type here, this is called GNU long, and it's been around a while. I didn't realize it was this old. It's been around a little while. What we're doing is we're looking for a type of service here. There's my pipe key. So what I'm going to do is pipe in. This is called pipelining. I'm going to do this stuff after I do this. So what I'm doing is I'm piping in this thing here. Now what is it doing here? It's looking for this $ service thing. This is a variable. To bash, this would be a variable. So we're going to grep for some variable called service. That's coming from the file that we're piping in. And we're going to describe this service. So we say system control status, whatever service that it is we're piping in from the text file. No pager grep e loaded activities. So we're just doing a little Linux command here to figure out all this activity here, and then we'll print out the service name. And if we find a service here, if we find the $ service, we're going to print out this information. Else, if we don't find the service, we're going to say service not found. And finally, I want to point out a couple of things to you. When we're using bash scripting, if statements are completely normal, those if and else, they're all fine. There's your if, there's your else. Notice here that in bash, to denote the end of an if statement, we reverse the word if and we say fi. So if, else, fi. And finally down here at the bottom, we're saying that done. What we're going to do here is very interesting to me. So this is a redirection operator that's going the wrong way. So you notice here that this is the less than sign, less than, or you might call it the left angle bracket. And what it's doing is it's going and reading the file services.txt and it's piping it into done. And so we're saying here that while read.service here, we do this thing, and we grab these services, and we pipe them out. If we find a service that is in this list, we put out this status, else we say service not found. So that's the way that the bash script is working. So I'll Control O to enter, Control X. I'll do an ls tech L. You can see that it's out there. It's 571 bytes long. The problem is it is not executable. So this is the user, this is the group, this is anyone else that's not that user or in that group. So this is here is user Cali. This is group Cali right here. And then this is the world. That's called the world or other. We're saying that the world has read-only permissions to this. For you and I to be able to run this as a shell script, what we have to do is change the permissions on it. So a really easy way to do that is to just say chmod. So I'm going to chmod 775. I'm going to make this a 775. And I'm going to specifically call out this shell script right here like that and hit enter. And then I'll do clear the screen. I'll do an ls tech L again. And you notice here that this thing has changed color to green. The reason for that is because it is now executable. Well, why is it executable? Well, read the permissions again. Read, write, execute is 7. That's octal. So X is worth 1 point, W is worth 2 points, R is worth 4. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. The group has executable rights, and world has executable rights. The only difference here is that world, Cali user and Cali group can write to the file. World cannot write to the file. It can only execute the file. And finally, we remember that if we want to execute this file, we type in a /. The reason for that is because we're currently positioned in the same folder as this bash shell script, and so it either needs to be in the path, or if we're running it natively like this, right locally, you put a / in there to get it to run, and then we can type in check services.shell. By the way, you could put in the path to the file. You don't have to be local to it. What I mean by that is you don't have to be in the same directory as it's in. You don't have to be local to it. You could type in the path and it would execute the same way. So you'd say, / home, Cali, whatever, wherever the file is located, and you could get it to run that way. Or if it's in the path, the Cali path, then it would automatically execute for you as well. So I hit enter, and we see now the output from this. So what it did was a beautiful job, very fast. It found Nginx. It says Nginx is not found. SSH, it told me about SSH here. It told me about cups here. It's got a PID, a thing called a process ID, very useful information. And then it told me about cron. So that's the point with Cali. We can use a pipeline, we can use the pipe key to pipe in some relatively complicated symbols there to be able to do what we want to do. So this is the reason we like shell scripting. Now you should be aware that we can use the T command alongside this executable. So if I ls, I see the executable sitting out there. I could put in a / check services .sh. So I'm going to run the executable, but now what I can do is I can pipe that into some command. I said pipe and I put in the greater than sign, didn't I? I'm going to pipe this into, I'm going to use the T command to create a log for me, and I'm just going to call this services.log, for example, just so I know what it means. Now again, the extension is really not required, but the idea with the extensions is it helps you understand what it is that you're looking at. So we'll go ahead and run this command, and now if I clear the screen, in ls, I have T'd this into log. So I ran the command so I can see it on the screen, and then I can cat out services.log and see what services are there for me. And this log you could use for like Linux rsync, so you could take this log and send it elsewhere to another Linux box to display to you, so you don't have to be on the machine to be able to see what's happening. You really don't need this script to do that. You could use regular Linux commands to do it. But the point here is to show you how a bash script is created and how you might use something like pipelining and commands like system control to create a much more user-friendly output. Now let's turn our attention to PowerShell, because things are a little tiny bit different in PowerShell. Okay, now I'm in PowerShell now, and you can see that I've changed to C:, which is the C drive, the users folder, W held, documents, PS projects. And I've done basically the same thing, except I just proper cased the name of the directory here, the folder. And what I want to do now is I want to create the same sort of thing. So I'm going to Notepad this time. Notepad is going to be your default text editor within PowerShell. By the way, I'm running this as admin, and I'm going to call this services.txt as well. And there it is. Do you want to create a new file? Yes, I want to create a new file. Same sort of idea. So what you do here is you pipe in the services that you're interested in. So let's look for the spooler service, and a service called WUAUSERV. I had to look to make sure that spelling's right. WUAU serve, and then we'll look for the Windows Defender, WinDefend service. So these are Windows services that are out there, and you can always get the name of these things by simply clicking the magnifying glass, looking for services, launching the services MSI file here, and you can come down and right click any one of these services, go to properties, and get its name here. So in this case, this ActiveX installer is called AXINSTSV. So that's the idea, and that's what we're after, is we're after the names here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. So File, Save. Now that's the equivalent of editing this in Nano in Linux and saving your changes. We'll go ahead and close out of here. Next thing we're going to do is create a PowerShell script here. So we use Notepad again for this, and again we're going to call it check services, but in this case we're going to give it an extension of PS1, stands for PowerShell, so it's going to be .ps1. This extension is required when you're working in PowerShell, so you've got to realize that when you see .ps1, we're talking about a PowerShell executable, a script of some kind. And there we go, we say yes, I want to create a brand new file. Okay, and here's the text. We don't need shebang here. We do continue to use the hashtag, #, number sign, sharp symbol to denote a comment. We are declaring a variable here called services, and notice here that it says get content path services.txt. I'll come back to this in just a minute, but I want to show you something interesting about what's going on here when you're using a variable like this. It could be that you might run into a problem. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you happen to run a Notepad, a PowerShell command, and you want to pipe a string into a command, for example, I'm going to say here the zoo, like that. And I've got this string sitting out here, and I'm going to pipe it into get process. Well, now this is completely illegitimate. PowerShell has no way of knowing what the zoo is, and so it's going to throw an error, and there's what the error looks like, and it puts tildes underneath here. It's saying, I don't understand what get process is with regard to this combination here. So it's telling you that it's got some category info, invalid argument, get process, parameter binding exception. The parameter here is the pipe key. We're trying to bind this to this string, and it's not going to work. Now this leads to some really interesting stuff. So let me show this to you because there's a good command here. I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to type in this command, get help. Now remember that the PowerShell commands don't need to be in proper case like this. You can do them in lowercase, all caps. Doesn't matter. Windows is not case sensitive like Linux is. And we're going to say get service like this, and we're going to ask for the full list. So we're getting help on the command get service here, and we want it to give us all the information on everything that's available with this command. So I hit enter, and it's a big document. It's like reading a man page inside of Linux. But the main thing that I want to point out here is I scroll up to the top. This thing is enormous. Right down here, we've got this. Where is it at? Let me see if I can find it. Right here. See where it says accept? I'm under name, and it says accept a pipeline input. It needs to know a property name or a value, but it cannot take something that is not already a declared value or a declared property name. So that's why this thing wigged out when we ran that using a string like we did above. So this is really an interesting point. The main thing that we're trying to point out here is that there are certain things that are permanently set inside PowerShell, and you would need to be aware of this, and you'd have to really dig a ways. You'd have to go into the Get Help files to dig and find out that we have to supply a property name or a value by value into our pipeline in order for this to be able to run. So this is not going to run because we're just supplying a native string and it doesn't know what to do with that. So I will clear the screen here, and we'll go ahead and get started with our script. So I'm going to do an ls in the folder, and I have this check services ps1. Let's do a notepad, check services.ps1. Boom. There it is. Let's go through and look at this. Now we are declaring a variable $services. It's lowercase, it's fine. And we're piping in the PowerShell get content, and the path is going to be services.txt. That text file lives out there because we just created it. So we're saying in here we're not pipelining anything. We're just saying go into services.txt, look at the services that I have there, and then get their content and put that into a variable called services. Now this $sign is pretty common. It's used in both Linux bash scripting and in PowerShell scripting. It's not used in things like Python. You'd go about doing this a little bit differently in Python or say C or JavaScript for that sort of an idea. Also notice here that this isn't going to be a while loop. We're using a different kind of a loop. It's called a for each loop, and what it's doing is it's saying go into $services, and $services is pointing to the content in this text file here. And it's saying for every service, each individual little line that you find in services.txt, for each service that you find in this $services here, do something. Get the service. Its name is going to be $service. Now remember that it's going to be iterating through this text file. We put on some other switches here. Error action silently continue. So if there's an error, just keep going. And we print out the text here. Write host. They put in a little delimiter here and a little delimiter here, and then they output whatever the service is. Then they're going to get the service info. So they say if service info, status is service info status, display name is service info dot display name, write host display name, write host status, else write service not found, and write host. So it's the same sort of idea, but in this case what we're doing is we're using a little bit different scripting to get the job done versus what we would be doing in Linux. This is a PowerShell script. So I will do a file save, and then I will close this file. Alright, now to run this script, you do this same basic idea here, except instead of // it is /. This is very, very important for Windows versus Linux. I don't know if this is because Microsoft was always angry at Linux and it's going to do things the Windows way. I doubt it. It's just the reverse. It's like the fork and knife and spoon, the order of arrangement on certain tables is different on other tables, that sort of idea. It doesn't matter. But in this case, we do a / instead of a // instead of a // and then we tell it that we want to run check services.ps1 and hit enter. and it goes ahead and queries that list that we have, and it gives us really nice output here. That's the way of accomplishing both of these things, both in Linux versus as in PowerShell. And the only thing I want you to be careful of is to remember that there are parameters that have to be passed in order for this script to run. So that's all I've got for you. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you like these videos, please continue to subscribe, watch them, comment on them. I love looking at your comments. My dog's very happy. She's playing with her squeaker toy. And I will talk to you in the next video. Have a great day.